you know, each week we always have some kind of strange technical issue. And this week, I thought I'd like to challenge myself. So we're trying a new version of the software that allows us to stream to 5 independent places at the same time. So as I'm talking to you now, I'm in a hypnosis group, I'm on a hypnosis page, I'm on my personal page, I'm on YouTube. We are everywhere. So if it all sets on fire, that is why. So we're going to test things, and it should be good. Each week we bring you a fantastic guest, and tonight is absolutely no exception. This guy's makes some absolutely phenomenal shows, got some great branding, and has been doing the 50 Shades of Comedy, which has some great branding as a comedy show. He is a comedian, a hypnotist, an absolute star within the hypnosis community. So if you have lots of questions, please do not hesitate to ask, because these shows are your opportunity to really pick the brains of the experts, the performers that are actually out there doing this stuff. This isn't just classroom stuff and textbook stuff. This is people that will tell you the tales from the road of what it's actually like and what really goes on. So without further ado, please, we're going to play the little intro, and then we'll welcome to Grant Talks Funny Bits, Darin Frazier. He is there. Darin.
He is there.
Yes, I put myself on mute then for a second. First of all, I just have to say, first comment goes to Natasha Stanley, who says, hey.
Hey, Natasha, how are you?
There we go. Fantastic. So, Darin, is it, first of all, did I pronounce that right? Is it Frazier or Frazier?
No, Frazier, and it sounds much better with your accent.
Oh, thank you very much. It's one thing I love about the States is they think I've got a nice accent. In the UK, I'm common as muck. So first things first, whereabouts in the US are you?
So I am on the West Coast in the Central Valley of California, which puts me about 45 minutes south of Sacramento and about an hour and a half east of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Nice. So you're in a warm bit then?
We are definitely in a little bit of a warm climate, and it's cherry season. I've got a cherry orchard across the street from my house, which I absolutely love, my favorite fruit. So I'm in the right place, a little town called Linden, California.
Wow, it sounds picture postcard, I think they call it. That does sound lovely. So first things first, how are things COVID-wise in your state where you are at the moment?
Well, you know, our governor still has us basically with a mask mandate, which I'm okay with for now, personally. I've been double vaccinated. I'm comfortable going out in public. I've had to go out in public a lot, but I've always taken my precautions. California is an interesting state. We don't seem to have a lot of moderate people politically. You're either one side or the other. You're either extremely conservative and you hate the governor, or you're extremely liberal and you love the governor. And I'm probably one of those few people that fall right in the middle. I'm conservative in most ways, but yet, this last year really, as a hypnotist, and I'm sure you probably saw it, Grant, realized that, a lot of hypnosis was used to politicize a virus, which I really, really couldn't understand how so many hypnotists actually fell for that as well. Yeah. But ultimately it's about being healthy, taking care of your family, your friends, and I'm glad we're getting back to normal. I'm looking forward to doing some shows. I haven't done a show live since February 29th of last year. Wow. And I actually did a coronavirus routine that night that I created, and that was the one and only time it will ever be seen.
I must admit, I remember one of the last shows I did before this happened, and it was just starting to come out on the news, and it was at that level where you could joke about it.
Right.
And I remember one of my volunteers coughed, and I made some reference to that. And I look back now and I think, how insensitive. It's been crazy.
My routine was a little different. I had the entire audience, whenever I said Corona, they would hold up their beers. And I had a guy up on stage that was hypnotized, and I told him he was the head of the CDC, and it was his job to protect the audience from the coronavirus. So every time they'd hold up their beers and I'd say Corona, he'd jump up and start yelling at the audience and telling them, they're all going to die. This is a mass crazy virus. And, at the time we only had, maybe 8 or 10 cases that were known here in the States. And it wasn't long after that where we realized the magnitude of what we were going to deal with for the next year, and we still are.
Yeah. I mean, here in the UK, we're just starting to get out of it. We've got, I think June the 21st is our next deadline, but then all of a sudden they've discovered a new strain of the virus. So that's all, there's a lot of fear and anxiety being promoted.
There is.
Yes. So safety first.
Yes. And a lot of room for hypnosis to help people with that fear and anxiety as well, if you're on the therapy side.
Yeah. I'm surprised I've not seen more therapists pushing the kind of overcome fear of needles and that type of thing. I thought I would have seen more of that locally being promoted, but hey ho. So let's get to it. What was your first experience? How were you first exposed, I think that's the right word, to hypnosis?
Well, my story is probably a little different than most people. When I was maybe 8 to 10 years old, so 35, 40 years ago, we went to our local county fair and there was a hypnotist performing. I can't remember who it was. I couldn't tell you at the time, but I remember watching that show as we were passing by and going, wow, that's interesting. They're controlling those people. So as a kid, all the way, 10 years old, 12 years old, whenever we would go to the fair, all my friends would want to go straight to the rides. And I wanted to go straight to the hypnosis show to see what time the show was going to take place. And I would watch every hypnosis show I could. Years later, I started going to the state fair. And here in California, we were very lucky that Terry Stokes was the headliner at the state fair for many, many years, who I've come to know and train with and become friends with. And Terry is really the guy. When I saw him, I said, I want to do that. And years later, I read some books. I bought a book at a used bookstore, and it was called How to Hypnotize Anyone. I read it to a friend of mine on my couch, and she went into hypnosis, and I had no idea what I was doing. And that was kind of my start. And then later on, I met Dr. Scott Lewis before he passed away, and he turned me on to some resources. So the internet was getting big in the late 90s, and I started, looking for things online, reading books, and eventually I started traveling out to Las Vegas and training with different hypnotists. And that's really when it kind of cemented it for me. Yeah.
I just saw a thing recently about some of those Vegas shows now. And it's sad to see that some of the bigger name casinos are kind of shaking up what they're doing and kind of, going for mainstream entertainment.
It is. I mean, I've heard Anthony Cool's closed. I haven't heard of anybody else. Luckily, to the best of my knowledge, Mark Savard is still going to be open at the Planet Hollywood. But, it is, a big event like this in the country gives a lot of businesses, or in the world, I should say, gives a lot of businesses a little bit of pause to reflect and decide if they want to try to go a different direction. And unfortunately for our business, that's happening.
Yeah. Brenda Kay says, yay, Dr. Scott, love him. And Roy Miller says, good evening.
Hey, Roy. Hi, Brenda. Yeah, Dr. Scott was an amazing man. He opened up for some friends of mine, did a comedy show, and he was the headliner. And we got to sit and talk and then have, I guess you call it a late night breakfast after the show. We all went out to a little dance club locally. And, I had probably, more contact with him and learned more about hypnosis from someone doing it that night than I ever had before. And that was, a 6 to 8 hour period that I'll never forget in my life.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about it's like for me, there's you first get interested in it, you read some books, you do some training, you go on somebody's course. And then, like you said, then you find someone and you have a moment where it is almost like not mentorship as such, but you just make a connection and a friendship within the industry, and the level of learning gets so much deeper, if you know what I mean.
I find that to be absolutely true. And, there's good and bad in our industry. And a lot of people are popping up teaching courses to make money. Some of them probably shouldn't be teaching courses. And I've trained with a lot of people. And to be honest, I've learned a little bit from each and every one. But it wasn't until I trained with Mark Savard, and I'll give him a plug. Mark performs at the Planet Hollywood, where I felt I truly understood hypnosis, because a lot of the courses out there will just teach you to say an induction. You're going to get a certain amount of people hypnotized, and then you do your routining. Mark Savard was the first time I ever actually understood what hypnosis was, how it worked, and how people go into hypnosis. And I'm one of those guys where if I understand it, then I can really play with it and I can make it work. And, every hypnotist does things a little bit differently. I've been lucky enough to train with some of the bigger names in hypnosis, and I've learned something from each and every one.
I think it's one of those things that, because people's attitudes are always changing, people's attention spans are always changing, the understanding of the psychology is always changing. And there isn't and we were talking earlier about the groups that people have politically. I think
Correct.
sometimes in our industry, there's a lot of that. People
There is.
learn from one person and then latch everything onto that one person's style and training. Whereas, you can learn a lot or a little from a lot of people and really kind of, develop your skills. So your first show, how did you go from the training to doing that? What was that first show like?
Well, the first show was an unmitigated disaster. I was hired to do a New Year's Eve party, and this was when I hadn't trained with Mark yet. I trained with some other hypnotists. They decided to hold it in a very, very large garage with the refrigerator right next to where I was doing the show. So during the show, people would get up, clank beer bottles. Honestly, it was an unmitigated disaster. After I trained with Mark, I decided I had a fairly large home. I decided to do a home hypnosis party. I invited a bunch of friends over, and they came, and I did a show, and it went smashingly well. And then after that, I started thinking of ways to do more hypnosis shows without having a name in the industry, so to speak. So I rented a theater, which unfortunately this week in Stockton, that theater actually burned down. It was for years a movie theater and then turned into an event center. But I did a show there, and then I started doing a regular local show where I made a deal with the owner of the bar restaurant, or maybe you call it a pub where you are. And I still do a regular show there, 10, 12 plus years running. And it's called 50 Shades of Funny, Comedy, Hypnosis, Chaos. We have a couple of stand-up comedians, guys. A lot of these guys you've seen on TV. And then I do a Las Vegas style comedy hypnosis show. I wanted to show people hypnosis in a different way, things they hadn't likely seen before, unless they'd been to Vegas. I do family-friendly shows, but that show primarily, that's more of an adult show.
I remember seeing the branding coming out for the 50 Shades of Comedy. And I just think it's great branding. It's a great poster, and you look at it and it's a good night out.
Thank you.
I think that's where a lot of stage hypnosis posters go wrong. There's too much emphasis on looking like a serial killer and not so much of like being an entertaining show. So, but the 50 Shades of Comedy is phenomenal branding.
Well, I had been doing the show, just calling it Comedy and Hypnosis Night for a while, and we changed the names. And then the 50 Shades of Grey books came out. And so I actually ended up thinking, it's time to rebrand the show, or at least that version of the show. So I bought the books. I read the entire first book, read parts of the second and third one, looked for show ideas, said, I'm going to throw these ideas into the show, and then I'm going to rebrand the show. And I actually got, I always get regulars that always show up, but I got a whole new breed of the audience of people showing up because they said, hey, I've read the book. I like it. I want to see what that's about. So I have some routines that are based on things that are in the books. And then, so we call it 50 Shades of Funny, Comedy, Hypnosis, Chaos. And we've, if you've ever seen Beecher's Madhouse or even Absinthe, which is a great show in Las Vegas, little elements that appear in those shows, I've kind of taken those, and at times we'll throw them in. You might be in the middle of the comedians and you might have something else going on, some type of chaos where somebody's running up and down the aisle creating chaos. And then here comes the hypnotist to save that part of it. So we try to make it a little more than just a standard show.
Yeah. And there's something about an immersive show that kind of breaks that fourth wall and gets everyone involved. Natasha Stanley says, with it being called 50 Shades, do people expect eroticism?
I don't know that they expect it, but we do always say that there's adult content. We are careful. If you notice, I don't put a lot of stuff on YouTube. And the reason is because most of the shows I do regularly where I'm in control of everything are adult shows. And my goal is never to embarrass people. I've seen hypnotists before where I've called them or private messaged them because they had a YouTube video of a woman that, they did a hot and cold routine, and the woman was literally on stage in her bra and panties, and a hypnotist posted that on YouTube. And I said, if you ever hope to get a corporate show or a clean show again, you better snag that down. There are all these, and this was a hypnotist who had done a lot more shows than me, but apparently didn't have the presence of mind to realize that there's still a line between being funny and being dignified with your volunteers. And that's my goal, is to always have my volunteers leave the show going, not only do I want to go home and watch that video, but I want to participate again because I had so much fun. And I realized the hypnotist wasn't the star of the show. He was the facilitator. My volunteers are the star of the show. And that's what makes it fun for me.
Absolutely why. And the adult content thing it works great in the right settings, and exactly that you've just said. By not posting the pictures and videos of those people in those scenarios, it protects you, your show, and their dignity as well.
Absolutely.
I remember a hypnotist who shall remain nameless, but at the time it was at that stage. I think it's like 2 or 3 years in when people become the world's greatest.
Sure.
And he posted a picture, and I understood why he posted the picture, because it looked like a phenomenal show. But there was a very attractive girl in that show that was wearing a short skirt. And, it's not a look that I would want my sister or it's not a look that you want out there publicly. But he'd not seen it from that point of view. He'd seen it from the point of it looked like a hilarious show and everyone was laughing and having a good time. And it's like, have you not noticed that you can actually see up the girl's skirt? And that's what, for me, that's what scares people from volunteering sometimes, if they think they're going to get caught off guard with that type of stuff.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things that I do, especially with girls that come on stage with church, in the old days when I first started watching Terry Stokes, they would put a towel over the lap of the female volunteers. One of the best things you can do is just go out at holiday time, around Christmas or Halloween, and buy boxer shorts in different sizes with funny sayings on them. And if a woman comes up with a short skirt, I usually work with a stage assistant when I'm doing my adult shows. She walks them off to a private area. They slip on the boxer shorts. Nobody cares. It doesn't take away from the fun of the show. And in fact, sometimes it'll give you a little something else to talk about. I've had women put on SpongeBob shorts or Superman or, what have you. And then you make a little joke in the moment. Many of my best friends are comedians. And of course, they always come up with their jokes. But what we do a lot of times to make the show funnier ends up being a form of improv. So if something happens in the moment and we can make a joke about it, our show is different. It's original. It's always fresh because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you're right on the improv stuff as well. I think improv is such an important part of stage hypnosis, because as much as you structure and run your show in a certain way, there's always going to be that thing that kind of catches you off guard and gets you by surprise. Quick question from Natasha again. She says, have you ever been approached regarding the adult side of hypnosis or the kink side of hypnosis from the adult shows that you do?
Well, I have. Unfortunately, the couple of times I was approached were by gentlemen, I'll use that word loosely, messaging me or emailing me because they wanted me to unknowingly hypnotize their significant other or their girlfriend. And they were willing to pay a lot of money to have me fly to a certain area to do that. And I said, it's not something that's ethical to me. It's not something I'm going to do. If she's willing to participate and knows ahead of time, and you want to fly me down there to help me enhance your love life in some way, I'd be glad to do that. But anything that's unethical or to just try to turn someone kinkier in the bedroom, I just won't do it. I think the benefit we have as hypnotists is that if we have a wife or a consenting partner, we can enhance our own sex lives using hypnosis and, with approval, of course. But it's amazing what you can do with the power of the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. David Banfield says, good idea with the shorts. Scott Unwin, hello, Scott, says you need to bring your show to England.
I would love to.
Yeah, Natasha Stanley says, I hear this so much. Sleazeballs learning hypnosis to take advantage of girls. You may as well just tag me in that, Natasha.
Well, it's funny because there are a lot of hypnotists where they get into it because, I mean, I remember being a kid looking on the back of comic books and there were ads for how to control women. And realistically, hypnosis is anything that involves suggestion. So if you talk to someone a certain way, a guy trying to pick up a girl at a bar, there are certain things you can say that are a form of suggestion and a form of influence. And unfortunately, I have met people in this industry where I think the only reason they got into hypnosis was because they thought it was going to help them enhance their love life in some way. And you have to be very, very careful about that. And especially with the liability of that, because there are hypnotists who get accused of things that they haven't done, let alone the ones that have actually done something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so important. I'm very conscious of, you know, I'm a we'll say middle-aged guy, you know, approaching my 40s. I'm a middle-aged guy, and yeah, it's I'm very conscious of that image of, you know, being seen with a young, attractive girl at a show and it looking a little bit that way, if you know what I mean. So it's an image as male hypnotists that we do get tarred with, I think, a lot of times. When you talk about your adult show and you say you have an assistant sometimes, I think you said she was a female assistant. I think that helps so much sometimes because it reassures the females in the audience that everything's okay if there's another female on stage as well.
I think it really does. One of the other things I learned from one of the people I trained with, so if I do any type of love-hate routine, which there are different variations on those, the love girl will never be the most attractive girl on stage. She will always be someone that maybe a little heavier, maybe a little older. If I get a woman who's in her 60s or 70s, you know, significantly older than me, she is going to be my love girl, guaranteed. And I'm probably going to give her an off-mic suggestion to have her pinch me on the bum when we're dancing. The most attractive girl is almost always going to be the girl who finds me absolutely disgusting and repulsive. You know, and there's a way of doing that where you're taking away the creep factor of the show and still, you know, just entertaining the audience, because the audience is still going to be laughing. If I pick the most attractive girl, I'm doing two things. I'm one, feeding my ego, and I'm two, making myself look like a creep. You know, so you just don't do that, you know. And the other thing is you have to be careful and never, ever date someone that you've hypnotized on stage first. If you just don't do it, because you don't know what the repercussions are going to be later.
Yeah. A couple of things as well. David Banfield says women hypnotize men all the time.
Absolutely.
And John McCabe says, I think he's referencing me saying middle-aged. He says, you're middle-aged again. Cheers, John. So, yeah, we seem to have we went down a bit of a rabbit hole on that one. Also, Natasha says, I've done a lot of research and spent time studying NLP in order to recognize when it's being used by people and ads targeted towards me. Yeah, I think it's one of the things, once you start studying hypnosis, you see those suggestions in advertising and everywhere around you.
Yes, absolutely. You start to notice more. You become aware, just like if you go to you see a little bump on your face, it might not be anything to you, but you go to a dermatologist and he sees it and he recognizes that that's something that should get checked. You know, as we become more knowledgeable about hypnosis, there are certainly things that we go, oh yeah, that's a form of hypnosis. Point that you and I talked about earlier, a lot of the tribal identity that's gone on in this last year and how this pandemic has been politicized by so many, unfortunately. You know, when it's a virus in the wild. Sometimes the universe throws us curveballs and we don't always hit them out of the park.
Absolutely. You talked earlier about that show that was David says, is your assistant a hypnotist too?
She is not. I've actually used a couple of different assistants. None of them are hypnotists, although they have worked with me enough where they do have some, I would say, amateurish hypnosis knowledge. They know the signs to look for when a volunteer is going into hypnosis, whether it's lacrimation or fluttering of the eyes, the deadening of the skin where they almost seem like they're perhaps a stroke victim. So they know the signs to look for. They're more trained to basically be my second safety person on stage. And I work with my assistants where if I'm on one side, if I have a row of 10 people and I'm on one side, they're always on the other. We're always concerned about safety. When I produce a show, I have an elevated stage, which is 2 feet off the ground. And so we don't want a volunteer to fall off the edge of the seats and then tumble off the side of the stage. That's a big liability. And I've actually seen that happen on some videos that appear on YouTube. So she is more of a safety factor, but she's obviously attractive as well. So she provides a little bit of eye candy that goes into the, adult nature of the show. And we've played with different costumes, but generally they don't dress in a way that's overly provocative. It's in a way where she looks like she might be going out to dance or to a party that night. And again, the nice thing about having an assistant on stage is that a lot of times it's kind of like that splash factor. If someone starts to fall out of the chair, she can go over, put a hand on their shoulder, whisper in their ear, tell them you're stuck to the chair, and they'll accept that because she's working with me. That's kind of the way the subconscious mind works. And they feel safer and they remain in their chair.
Fantastic. You have already answered this, but John McCabe very quickly says he's missed the start of the show. Not sure if it's already been asked, but what was the first time like that you hypnotized someone for entertainment value and how did it go? But yeah, I do think you did answer that.
Yeah, we talked about the home party I did in a garage New Year's Eve, and that one didn't go well. But New Year's Eve party, but the first home party I did went fantastic.
So, in your years of performing stage hypnosis in various different places, what's been your most challenging show when things didn't go right? And I think we learn most from those shows when things do go wrong and you go, do you know what? Next time I'll know never to do that again. What was the worst show? What was your most challenging show so far?
Other than the one that was the very first one in the garage, I did a show in a bar where, we had made all the arrangements that, the whole bar, basically everyone had to pay admission to come in. So they were there for the show. And then the owner of the bar decided that he was going to allow some friends who had no interest in watching the hypnosis show or the comedy come in, sit at the bar. They were loud. They were obnoxious. We didn't have a big crowd that night. So the people who were up on stage were very limited in nature. And I think I only ended up having one really good volunteer that night. But that was early on. And I've since trained where I've learned some other techniques where I'm not as much worried about background noise. One of the guys I trained with, which I had some reservations at first because he's got a different mixed reviews in the industry, but I trained with Justin Trance, and a lot of people love Justin. A lot of people absolutely hate Justin, but Justin was a phenomenal trainer and taught me some techniques about not worrying about the background noise. There are ways of hypnotizing people where the noise doesn't matter. So if I'm in a loud environment, I may do more one-on-one work on the stage, and there's a way to do that quickly. I don't often do inductions where I lay people on the stage. Although if I'm at my own personal stage, it's swept, it's vacuumed before the show. I know the stage is clean. I have no problem doing that. And if I think I'm going to be in a noisy environment, then sometimes I'll use more inductions that are like an eye lock, which tends to get people into a deeper level quicker. At least that's what I've observed in my experience. And I stay away from the progressive muscle relaxation. I'll only use those as a deepener.
Yeah, absolutely. Very quickly, just going through the comments here as well. Brenda K says she loves to have a hunky male assistant. It's very helpful to have a second set of eyes. Yes.
I'll volunteer, Brenda.
Yeah, I mean, Brenda's show, her dress on stage, the sparkles,
very glamorous.
Show it all makes such a massive difference.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the most challenging show. What's been your favorite show, whether it been someone that you've worked with, a venue that you've performed at? What's been the show that you visualize when you're kind of going through the motions of the best show you've done so far?
Wow, that's a tough one. One of the best shows I ever had hypnotically was I had so many volunteers that we had to add extra chairs to the stage. I think we ended up having about 20 volunteers on a very, very tight stage, and 18 of them were hypnotized. out of the 20.
Nice.
So then after I got rid of those two, the stage was too small to operate with 18, trying to decide who I was going to keep, who were my best volunteers, because all of them were super animated. It's a tough problem to have. It's kind of like the guy who's got, $10 million in the bank, oh, he made another million, poor guy, it's kind of like that type of problem. I've had some shows where, things just go, so perfectly that I'm like, what could go wrong? And obviously, actually, one of my favorite moments wasn't really a show. It was an appearance I did on TV up in Sacramento, which isn't far from me. And it was actually promoting a show. And I ended up hypnotizing one of the hosts of the show. And I've done that several times. And I was actually supposed to hypnotize, I forget what these guys were called, but they were like a Chippendales dance troupe. And they all backed out, but yet they're sitting right in front of the stage where we're being filmed as I'm hypnotizing one of the show hosts. And I ended up using a routine. I'm a Howard Stern fan. So I used a routine where I told the guy he could only say the words Baba Booey, which is a Howard Stern thing. And they ended up picking it up and playing it on the Howard Stern show. So that was pretty exciting for me. I'm driving along one day listening to Howard Stern, and all of a sudden I hear my clip, my voice, and Howard Stern saying my name. So that was pretty exciting for me.
Brilliant. I've seen a couple of clips sort of thing where you're doing like radio interviews and hypnotizing people to promote shows. How important is that kind of contacting local media in the run up to a show?
Well, it's always helpful. The nicest thing is when I'm able to post 2 or 3 days before a show, or even a night where we're doing 2 shows, that we're completely sold out. Yeah. And that happens regularly at the local show that I do. So oftentimes when I make TV appearances, even though I'll make TV appearances the morning of the show or the day before, oftentimes we'll be completely sold out by the time that appearance has happened. But then I'll get people who will contact me perhaps about doing private events or doing hypnotherapy. And again, it's a way of getting your name out there. So if I were going to write a book, could I teach people how to hypnotize people? Absolutely. What I'm better at is probably teaching people how to work with the local media to get publicity and get your name out there, because I've basically done it on my own. I've done it for years.
It's one of the things about being a self-employed sole trade business entertainer, is you are your team, you are your marketeer, your assistant, your logistics organization. You have to do everything, and having an understanding of all of that. The actual show part of it is just a tiny little bit, really. That's the fun bit we get to do. It's all the other stuff that's a bit crazy.
Yeah, and and we talked about improv earlier. It's really funny because oftentimes leading up to, my regular show, I won't put together a set list until literally the morning of, as I'm trying to figure out what to do. And then, my assistant it's common. We're in the back room. We're getting ready. A pre-recorded introduction is happening. We're getting ready to take the stage, and she'll go, "Are you ready?" And I'll go, "Nah, but that's normal." It's kind of like once you've done it enough, you get on stage, it just kind of flows. Yeah. It just kind of comes out. And then I'm looking for those little improv moments where I can make something special and maybe make a volunteer the star of the show, that might not have even thought about getting on stage at one point, and then giving them some positive suggestions in the end. I've had people who let me go back. One of the most rewarding things that's ever happened is when I do a show, someone volunteers because they want to have fun, but then I give them a positive suggestion toward the end of the show. And then I get a message from them a month later saying, when you gave me that little positive suggestion, and I'll often say, in your mind, I want you to visualize a color. When you visualize that color, I want you to make that color a part of you. And whenever you see that color just strengthens your resolve that you can do anything you want in your life, whether it's lose weight, stop smoking, what have you. And I'll get people that'll send me a message, "Oh my God, I picked the color green. So every time I'm at a stoplight and it turns green, I think about how confident I am and how strong I feel as a person, as a woman, what have you." Or when someone says, "After your show, I couldn't lose weight before, and now I've dropped 30 pounds in a month and a half, 2 months since your show." So things like that are as rewarding as actually pulling off the show.
Yeah. I always get, as entertainers, it's, as the laughter fades, the further away they get from the show. By giving them that, you're really giving them something that's going to stay with them for most of their life, really. So that's a great gift, is that.
Absolutely.
David Banfield says, "We British are notoriously bad at self-marketing." It's very true, is that. But hey ho. So you talked about training and the importance of training. Books. If you were to recommend 2 stage hypnosis or business books, what would those be?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think everyone should own Orman McGill's Encyclopedia of Stage Hypnosis. That was the second book I owned after the one I bought at the used bookstore, How to Hypnotize Anyone. Beyond that, I really don't know because I have so many and I don't know which is my favorite. Oftentimes, when I go and attend a live training course, it's the manual that comes with the course that I'll go back and refer to. To think of ideas. I think one of the problems that a lot of hypnotists have, stage hypnotists in particular, and I did the same thing, is after we come out of our first couple of trainings, the first thing we want to do is copy what we've learned, meaning we're doing somebody else's show. We haven't learned how to do our own show. And I made that mistake. I did that too. We have to find a style that's comfortable for us. I think if we find a style that truly fits our personality, you're going to do a better show, because as much as you're acting, doing a show, you're still being yourself, and the show just seems to flow more naturally. I did attend a seminar that Terry Stokes put on once called Better Your Best. We did it at Catherine Hicklin's home in Las Vegas. And Terry had some great ideas where you just go out. He told everyone to go out and buy one item for day 2 of the training between like $5 and $30, whatever it is. So I went in the store and there happened to be those zoodles, the things you have out at the swimming pool. And so I bought one of those. So we come in and I'm thinking, okay, so we're going to try to write some routine based on that. He goes, okay, now pass that to the person next to you and you get whatever they have. And then now we had so much time to try to write a routine just based on this one object. And the ideas that came out of that were phenomenal. It kind of taught me the process of how to create your own routine, or try to work backwards where you say, okay, what do I want this to result in? And then work backwards to actually create the routine.
Yeah. And it's a great idea of that whole mastermind, a collective of hypnotists exchanging ideas and ideas behind routines and just letting it flow and see what comes naturally. Tommy V says, he says hello. He says, my man.
Hey, Tommy.
So,
Love Tommy.
Yeah, great guy.
I'm surprised he's not out fishing today.
Brilliant. So what's next for you? Have you got a show starting to come in now? Have you got, when is your next show?
Well, I've got a couple of private events lined up. I actually didn't end up booking any grad nights this year because, again, we're in California and we don't know what the restrictions are. I've seen some of my friends like Salish and some other guys which are starting to travel and do shows around the country. And, they're even doing, safe shows where they're doing socially distant shows where they're spreading the students apart. To do my adult show, because some of the routines involve contact between the volunteers or close contact, we probably won't be getting back to any of those until September or October, I would guess. But then, like I said, I have a couple of private events coming up, and I'm looking forward to them. I've had some time to kind of throw in and work on some new routines, kind of tweak some of the ones I already have. So I'm looking forward to getting back out there.
Yeah. I must admit, I've done 2 socially distant shows. And I've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Actually, it's an outside venue, but it never goes to the level that you want it to with the social distancing and no contact. So it's but yeah, hopefully after the 21st, things should be back to normal.
Yeah, California, we're supposed to basically fully reopen. I think June 15th is where we're at now. I do know that a lot of venues are still being somewhat cautious because they're fearful of liability and, no way we can tell who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. We're not going to have a vaccination passport. So we'll see. Again, it's whenever someone comes into my show, one of the things I always do at the door anyway is that, you enter full liability, you waive liability, that your image may be shown on video. Although, as we discussed earlier, I don't put anything out there that's going to embarrass anyone or shame anyone, because that's not my goal. My goal is to actually have a fun show and then empower people. And you can do that even doing an adult show or a show that's perceived as risque.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you were to give a tip to a young Darin just starting out again, what would your tip be? Your nugget from the road that you think every hypnotist should know?
From the road or from training? Because they're different.
from the road, I tend to find there's a lot of stuff like, I mean, training wise, there's always, there's tales and there's textbooks and stuff like that, but all the training in the world, once you get out there and start hitting the road and doing shows, there's things that you kind of go, oh yeah, that's that.
Well, there are two things that I really, really like to do. I don't book a lot of back-to-back shows. I know guys that'll do 2 shows in a night. I don't do that. I actually like to go a little bit early and really take a good look at the venue and see how I'm going to set things up. Yeah. If I'm going to have an opportunity to do something a little bit different or to play a little bit. So I really do like to do that. The other thing I like to do, while some hypnotists like that, star factor of the first time anyone sees them is when they walk on the stage. Sometimes I actually like to go and talk to people ahead of time and get a little bit friendly, shaking hands, finding people who go, oh, I'd love to come up on stage, but I'm scared to. And I just try to put them at ease. I go, hey, look, I'm going to take good care of you. Let's play a little bit. And then I might do like a brief eye lock, or they'll go, oh, you can't hypnotize me. I've never, they told me I'm not hypnotizable. So then I'll do a brief eye lock, and I'll tell you what, if I get your eyes to lock where you can't open your eyes, will you promise me you'll volunteer tonight and I'll make you one of the stars of my show? And they'll go, sure. And then I'll get their eyes to lock. Next thing you know, that person's on stage and I make them one of the stars of the show.
Brilliant. That's a great tip, actually. Yeah. And again, you're kind of getting in there into the audience and really making it, making it immersive for the audience.
I think hypnosis over the years has been transformational from, like you said, the old guy who looks almost evil with the long, dark beard and almost the magic, sinister type look, to a stage where we know, I mean, people look at us as the star of the show because we're the guy they see on the poster. But we're the guy who, hey, I'm going to facilitate you having a really good time. I want to empower you. And I want you to be the star of the show. When the show is over, I want people to run up to you and go, oh, my God, you were so funny. You were hilarious. Was that real? Because that's the main question that a lot of the volunteers get. And then I get the people coming up to me going, oh, I know that was real because my wife would never act like that on stage. And then, of course, the people want to come up to us and take a picture or get an autograph. Stuff like that is definitely rewarding. But the most rewarding thing is when they come up to you and go, that was perfect. That couldn't have gone more smoothly. I don't know how you did it. And I know when we're doing a show, we're working our butts off. We're looking at every volunteer trying to go, okay, who am I going to name for this routine? Who am I going to give this routine to? Who am I going to get rid of? Who's going to be the most responsive? In our mind, we're doing 1,000 things at once, yet if we can make it look so smooth, like we're on autopilot, then we've really accomplished something.
Yeah. I think the correct word there that kind of struck with me is it's about empowering them. Not about our egos. Natasha Stanley says, not sure Grant fits this opinion, though. He likes to have his face on everything. The weirdest graffiti I ever had is I was promoting a show I was doing, and we had a massive trailer. It was like a big trailer thing that was parked up at the side of the roadside. And someone actually cut out a mug for a cup of tea mug, and stuck it to the side of the poster. So it looked like I was sat there with a mug of tea in my hand. Yeah, very random. So, yes. How can people find you? We've got your websites, the naughtycomedyhypnosis.com, stocktoncomedy.com. You're on Instagram, Facebook. Are you on TikTok?
I am not on TikTok. My 14-year-old wants to get me on TikTok, and the only thing I've used TikTok for was when he decided, hey, Dad, for my birthday, I want to take some of my birthday money and buy it on a cryptocurrency, which has actually paid off. So I probably should be on TikTok.
Yes. TikTok's been brilliant for cryptocurrency. There's a movement now. I think TikTok is maturing as an audience. We don't have to do silly dances. But Natasha Stanley's just saying now get on TikTok. She's the one that told me to get on TikTok.
Okay.
And the traffic that it drives, and I've had genuine leads come from stuff on TikTok, and it's 60 seconds of material, which is.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I have friends. I emceed a couple of events for some large real estate companies, and a lot of the realtors are on TikTok, and they do TikTok videos. And I mean, these are people that are selling millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate and making lots and lots of money, and they're on TikTok. And I think a lot of them started it because they thought it was something fun, and then they realized how many people are following them and how many referrals they're getting. How they're just promoting themselves. I don't know that I'm the biggest self promoter, and I probably need to do a little bit more of it. Most of my business actually comes from referral, where other people have seen what I've done and they'll refer me out to shows, and as you know, I have another business that I do full time, which I'm hoping to retire from that and focus on hypnosis and entertaining in the next year or two. I've been doing that for 20 plus years. But I really enjoy hypnosis. The main reason I haven't traveled as much is because my youngest son is 14. Now he's getting a little bit older. But when he was 9 or 10, it's hard for me to go out and do, 4 or 5 grad nights in the Midwest and be gone for a week and a half and miss some of his school activities. And I wouldn't do that. So now as he's getting a little bit older and he's starting high school, I will definitely be hitting the road a little bit more. And because of that, hypnosis has afforded me some other opportunities. I MC a lot of events, which I absolutely love. And then from there, I'll often talk a little bit about hypnosis or maybe even play with hypnosis while I'm MCing. And the other thing I've done recently is someone asked me to become a wedding officiant a few years ago. And I absolutely love writing weddings and telling people's story. Wow. And the funny thing is, I inject hypnosis into that because when I'm writing their story, I'm thinking, how can I tell this story in a way that's emotional for not only the bride and groom, but for the audience, the people who are attending the wedding as well. So I use some little suggestibility techniques and techniques that get people emotional. And people come up to me and I get hired for 3 or 4 more events every wedding because they say, oh my God, I love how you told their story. It was like you literally wrote a romance book about their life. So, but again, if we go to the level that everything hypnosis is suggestion, we can go so many different directions from there. And that's kind of the way I try to do things.
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, we have some hypnotherapists that watch this as well. And it's a bit of a plug for something I'm doing with Christopher Caress, who is a great cruise ship stage hypnotist as well. Learning stage hypnosis and performance hypnosis, even if you don't plan on going on stage and being an entertainer, it's so valuable to your therapy practice, and to learning hypnosis is so valuable to probably sales and marketing and anything that you do within your business kind of life. It always kind of helps so much to do that. So yeah.
I think so. And, it's funny because people take different paths. I know a lot of people who were hypnotherapists first and then became stage hypnotists. And I went the other direction because, again, I started watching shows when I was 8 or 9 years old. Some of my best friends were comedians. So I trained in stage hypnosis for years before I ever started taking hypnotherapy courses. And now I do both. But I love helping people. I certainly love, the hypnotherapy aspect of it. But I mean, I'll be quite honest with you, from a business perspective, you make a lot more money standing on stage for an hour and a half as a stage hypnotist than you ever do in an office for an hour with someone. Yeah. And also being the type of person and personality that I am, it's very difficult for me to do the type of hypnotherapy that I do because I really do get intense with my clients. And I often feel that emotion, and it can be draining as a hypnotherapist. Yeah. It can be absolutely draining. And I sometimes take that home with me.
Yeah. And that's from a lot of the people that we've interviewed over the last 18 months, however many shows that's been, with a few exceptions, the majority kind of really successful stage hypnotists have come from an entertainment background first, then into hypnosis, and then into therapy. Whereas I think sometimes if you go therapy to stage, you kind of work more of a therapist on stage, and you haven't got that directness, that authority. But there is some people that are exceptions to that. So yeah,
sure,
yeah, brilliant.
Sure. No, I agree, and I think some of the therapists I've known that have become stage hypnotists, they probably shouldn't be stage hypnotists. They're good therapists, but they're looking for another stream of income, or somebody's like, oh, you're a hypnotist, come do a show. And so basically they go on and they copy somebody else's show to start, you really have to look at yourself and say, am I really entertaining people? And I tell people all the time, and I've said this for years when people ask me about it, a competent hypnotist on stage is funny.
Yeah.
A really good entertainer will blow your socks off with a phenomenal show that you will not forget. And that really is the difference, because just the nature of hypnosis on stage is funny. But if you're truly an entertainer, if you've worked on your improvisational skills, if you've worked on, when you're dealing with the volunteers, that you know where to stand and you're not blocking them out. One of the mistakes a lot of new hypnotists make is that they'll literally turn their back to the audience, have the microphone in the face of the volunteer, and the audience can either see your face or the volunteer because you're actually blocking both.
Yeah.
Whereas you get someone like Catherine Hicklin, who was an actress for many, many years before she ever started doing hypnosis, she already knew about the blocking and the stage presence and where to stand. And her husband, who is a television producer, right? If you've ever trained at their center, which is behind her home, a little piece of heaven on earth in Las Vegas, it's amazing because you can train with Hollywood quality equipment, and you learn these little techniques. So these are things that every hypnotist can do. You can find things online if you search enough about, where to stand, when you're acting or when you're performing a show. And we need to put all of these aspects together because ultimately we're doing the show for the people who are behind us out in the audience and making our volunteers the stars of the show. And so we have to keep all of these things in mind when we're doing the show, along with the other 1,000 things that we're trying to think of when we're doing a show.
Yeah, it's like juggling chainsaws that are on fire. Brenda Kay says, I started as a hypnotherapist and started doing shows to promote my practice, which is a great way to do that. And agreed, you need to have an entertaining presence to be on stage. Brenda is one of those exceptions. Her show is, it's light.
Brenda's phenomenal.
The production value in the shows is phenomenal. And that's what good stage hypnosis needs as well. Like you said, the entertainment factor, stage presence, lights, production, all those things, the actual skit in and of itself, that making someone think that they're milking a cow or whatever the skit is that people are doing, that's a tiny bit of it. The comedy that really ramps it up happens between those skits as well.
No, absolutely. And depending on where you do your shows, when you do a grad night and you're traveling across the country, obviously you can't carry a whole lot of equipment. But when you do things nearby, like anything I do within 100-mile radius, I'm going to take all of my own equipment. I have my own stage. I have cameras. I have lighting equipment. And, a lot of hypnotists don't invest in equipment, and that's okay. But I choose to invest in equipment, and I'm constantly spending more money on equipment because I want the audience to come to my show and feel like, oh my God, we've got a Las Vegas style or Broadway style production in this little venue. And not only was the price of admission $20 to $35 worth it, we got a bargain, we got a value. And I think that's why I get the same, or a large segment of my audience that continues to come back because I provide them with a value.
Yeah. It's putting on a show. It's, as hypnotists, we can just turn up with our skills and a microphone and do a show and it be funny. But we can also turn up with lights, good audio, everything, and just over deliver. Sound is so important, especially on video, but especially in a show. If the sound isn't brilliant, that can have a detrimental effect on the show.
Now, having said that, if you're a really good entertainer and your sound cuts out, you'll learn little techniques where you're still able to continue with the show because you can't just stop in the middle of the show. And I did a show a few years ago, which was at a wedding reception. The guy loved hypnosis. He hired me. In the middle of my induction, the sound cut out. Nothing. And I'm telling them, they're supposed to be hearing this music and there's no music. So all of a sudden, the guy who was the main DJ, we had basically plugged into his system with just our laptop and mixer. So he comes in and he tells my guy, he's like, yeah, no, it's not me, it's you. And my guy's like, we're fully connected, it's you. Well, then he realized that a fuse had actually blown out on his amp. He had to run out to his truck, come back and fix it. And luckily I was able to save the show. The bride and groom who had hired me, they knew it wasn't me. They were thankful. They were like, boy, you really did a great show in spite of what happened. And I think that comes along with experience and comes along with, being a true professional where you're always thinking, hey, anything could go wrong. And at some point in life, doing enough shows, it will go wrong. And how are you going to respond to it? And the last thing you want to do as a professional hypnotist is panic. Because if you panic, the audience panics, your volunteers panic, and you just can't do that. You have to be in control at all times and seem calm. Even if your heart's racing 1,000 miles an hour on the inside, you need to appear calm, and that feeling will flow throughout your show, and it'll show in the quality of the show that you do.
Absolutely fantastic. Final question here as well. David Banfield says, Darin, do you have a pre-recorded intro or do you have the host introduce you?
If I can avoid it, I never, ever, ever have the host introduce me.
Yeah.
I have a pre-recorded intro. I am blessed to have become friends with a guy named Robert Banks. You can catch him at Rob Banks Voiceovers. I met him years ago, actually through Fiverr. We connected off Fiverr. Turned out he actually had gone to high school in the town where I grew up, here near Stockton. I'm outside of Stockton now. So we've become friends, and I've actually turned him on to other people in the hypnosis industry. I was the first hypnotist that he worked with. He's since done intros for a lot of big name hypnotists. He works with Richard Nongard a lot. I think I know he's worked with Catherine Hicklin. He's based in Las Vegas. And he is the guy for voiceovers. Every show is different. I have a basic intro that I use for my grad night shows. And then each individual show where we have different comedians, I'll have them record like a 45-second intro at the beginning of the entire show. And then I have an intro for me before I take the stage.
Brilliant. Final question from Brenda K. Darin, what is the wackiest thing that's ever happened to you in a show?
The wackiest thing that ever happened to me during a show, it was an adult show. I had a guy on stage who was the husband of someone I knew, but I had never met him before. I actually had him and his daughter on stage. They both volunteered that night. Although she went so deep in hypnosis, I couldn't bring her back. She was so lethargic, I ended up having to get her off the stage. We got to the end of the show, and I was ending my show that night with handshake orgasms. I am about 5'8", and at the time I was a little heavy, probably 230, 240. This guy was about 6'2", 6'3", 240, 250. When I shook his hand, he swung around behind me, jumped on my back, mounted me, and proceeded to treat me like a jackrabbit. So I braced myself, made sure I was at least a foot away from the end of the stage, got a look on my face like this, and luckily I didn't fall, and I was able to keep him up there until I popped him out of hypnosis. And that was probably the wackiest thing that's ever happened on stage.
Brilliant. David Banfield says, great guest, thanks.
Thank you, David.
Brenda Kay says, oh my God, no. I don't want to jinx it, but I've not been mounted on stage yet, and touch wood, hopefully it's not going to happen.
I hope it never happens again, but every year when I get the memory on Facebook, because I didn't post any video, but I posted the picture of him on my back, and you can clearly see me doing this. And so every year I will send his wife an email and going, hey, I'm still waiting for you and your husband to pay my chiropractor bill.
Yeah. But Darin, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck with everything that you got coming up. And guys, thank you very much for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me, Grant. I really appreciate it. And great talking to all you guys.